going on, everybody? Patrick and Austin from Obscure Reference here with another movie review. And this time we're talking about what are we talking about, Austin?
Gladiator 2, Ridley Scott's next historical epic.
Yeah. Came out just as of recording this a week ago, so I've now dated this video. But it's got Paul Mescal in the main role, Pedro Pascal, Joseph Quinn, and supporting roles in Connie Nielsen and Denzel Washington as well. Um, it's a movie. Let's talk about it, Austin. What'd you think of it? Oh, actually, before we even do that, what is your history with the Gladiator, the first Gladiator?
It's one of those movies that was like always on TV, right? Like you would pop that
Mm,
on at like you'd be watching surfing channels back in the day. Oh, Gladiator's on. Always a
yeah,
movie
why
you're gonna
not?
watch if you see that it's on.
Mm.
And then I watched it again on what like Tuesday of last week in preparation for the movie. So, great movie.
Yeah, I had avoided it somehow
Yes, I
for
know it's crazy.
20 years at least, however long that movie's been out. I watched it for the first time a couple of months ago, and I'll never speak ill of Ridley Scott. At least
Hmm.
I was until I saw this movie.
Old Ridley
I'm
Scott.
kidding. What's that?
Old Ridley Scott, anyway.
Yeah, well, he's had some bangers since then too. Um,
For sure.
but I don't. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna go out on a limb. I don't think this is a banger. I don't think this is
I
a
would
banger.
agree.
I I've been debating on how to discuss or frame my points around it, and I think I want to start by giving what I would give it out of 10, just to say, like as a starting point, so we kind of have an idea of where I'm at personally. I I probably would give it maybe a 6.5, maybe a 7 out of 10, but definitely no higher than a 7. Um, because like it feels like a lot of rehashing from the original Gladiator, and the new stuff. Some of it was interesting, some of it was not. Um, and of course, it's hard to look at this movie on its own and compare it to the first Gladiator without just being a little bit disappointed, because the first one is really powerful and has some really cool filmmaking techniques they use in that, whereas this one's like they kind of tried. Um, so this isn't a bad movie by any means. I did enjoy parts of this movie, but I did leave feeling a little whelmed, I'll say.
Hmm.
That's kind of where I'm at.
I would say I was disappointed with this movie, but I want to start, I guess, with the good. I think that the reason they made this movie was because Ridley Scott and the people he worked with wanted to have fun in Roman lore and set dressing, and they clearly did that. They had a lot of fun using Roman sets. They had a lot of fun making action scenes in the different gladiatorial arenas and outside of it. Like they clearly just that's what they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And at that part of it, I would say they mostly succeeded. Obviously, we're talking about somehow the like modern dark ages of CGI a little bit, where like it felt like for a while there was really good CGI and we've kind of gone backwards a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, it was a lot of fun, especially if you're not someone who knows anything about how the animals in this movie actually act. But we'll just like skip past that part. Um, Unfortunately, because they were so obsessed with that part of it, and they had literally nothing else to say, every other part of this movie is um, nothing new. They just rehash the exact same characters, some of the traits mixed up with different people, but same general concept of characters to do basically the exact same story with a little bit tacked on at the end, which amounts to nothing. And because this movie has nothing to say, it doesn't actually bring all of these things together from a story perspective in a way that matters. Whereas the reason those points and those beats were hit in the first movie was for a very specific reason. Um, and this movie just doesn't have that. So you can go into this movie, and if you've never seen Gladiator 1, it's probably, average to above average action movie. But all the other parts of it in terms of story and characters and development and all of that, it's not good, especially when you know what happens in the first movie.
Yeah, and I because like you look at the and I try to think of what I really dug about the first one, and it is the framing of things, the way that the coloring of it, just the way the movie itself is put together. Because you look at the story of the first one, like it's at its bare bones, like it's nothing revolutionary, but it's just the way it kind of all comes together. I think
It's so
that works
tight
for me.
though, right? It's got a very
Hmm.
specific point, and every single bit of that movie brings that point home.
Right. Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I was just absolutely astounded with that movie. Now I watched that movie in a couple of sittings, so I can't necessarily speak to like how the pacing works in that movie because I watched it over multiple sittings. But I can't speak to this one. Seeing this movie a day after I saw Wicked, which is I think at least 10 minutes longer than this movie. This movie felt longer than that, and not by a little bit. I was the pacing. This is not great. I was not overly interested in a lot of scenes. Um, uh, and again, a lot of this is going to sound super negative, but I did overall enjoy it. But I am convincing myself that maybe I'm going to give this a 6.5 instead. Um, but are we talking the spoilers? I
Yeah,
don't even
I
want
mean,
to
we're
do.
talking. Just go for it. I don't
All
like the
right.
breakup there. So
Okay. Then full spoilers. You had your warning. Get out. Come back when you see the movie. We'll be here. I struggle with this movie because I like the cast. I don't like some of their performances. I think bringing Connie Nielsen back was a good choice. I liked her in the first movie. I didn't care for her too much in this one. Um, and Paul Mescal, I he's a good actor. I'm sure he's a good actor. I didn't see it here.
his
Like
voice, I don't. What was going on there?
I don't know, man. Like I'm not giving him crap for trying. Like he definitely tried. It just and I'm not saying like there's a super high bar because I'm not going to sit here and say Russell Crowe's the best actor known to man, but he definitely had that. He's just your average, not your average general. He's like an above average general. He had that air about him. He had that charisma almost, and I didn't get that from Paul Mescal. Whereas Pedro Pascal, I got a little bit more from, but you know, it's not my favorite. It's not my favorite performance of his. To take his words, it's good, but it could have been better. Um, you know, and then I think Denzel's and Joseph Quinn were the best performances in this movie, but that's just me
See,
personally.
I hated Joseph Quinn's character,
Mm,
and I know you're supposed to. Like, you're supposed to hate
yeah.
both of them. That's the whole point.
Hmm.
But I, there's an inch. Okay, this is gonna get in like somewhat close to politics here, but I just have to make this point because it was something that
Hmm.
was very interesting to me. The reason that Russell Crowe works in the first movie is because he was like the stereotypical uh, actor of the like man's man, right? And he
Hmm.
portrays that very much in the role that he plays. And so that movie is coded towards like men and like very much like the manly man. And this movie,
Hmm.
they clearly were like, we're going to portray Rome in its later years much more like Rome. So you have Denzel Washington's character being very flamboyant and talking about how sometimes he's into men and sometimes he's into women.
Hmm.
And you have the senator with that kind of same setup there. And there's a lot of stuff like that that comes out where I'm like, I'm gonna be interested to see where people kind of land with this movie because the like sort of ingrained audience for this movie, I think, is gonna have issues with that part of it. But I thought it was part of the fun of this movie was like I said, where they just clearly chose to make the decision to play with all the different parts of what we conceptualize Rome as now.
Hmm.
And so I really liked that. And that's where I think Denzel is probably the best performance in this movie.
Yeah.
I think that my issue with the two emperors is they go too far to the like over the top version of
Hmm.
it. Now, whether or not that they, are actual portrayals of what later emperors are, I'm not going to like, I'm not a historian, so I'm not going to try and get into that part of it. But I
Yeah.
just think that it was so far that I was kind of out on that.
Like it
Whereas
was
I
almost a
think,
parody of itself.
yeah, I think that for theirs it kind of was.
Hmm.
Um, and then there was Denzel's, who I think was like really in the pocket of like this is like the perfect level, and to some extent his senatorial kind of like back and forth. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was
Yeah.
really in the pocket there. I think Lucilla, for the most part, was in the pocket, and then I think Pedro and what's his name, Paul. This guy, I can't remember. Is that
All
his name?
miscount. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, Paul were kind of like at the bottom end, like not quite in the pocket, but not necessarily
Hmm.
horrible, just kind of like mid. Um,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how I bracket the different characters there. So
Yeah.
I really think Denzel's was the best. Other, I guess, what's the doctor's name? I can't
Oh.
remember his name. He was pretty good.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
I liked him a lot actually.
he played foil, not necessarily in his actions, but in his demeanor to Paul's
Hmm.
character and the way they kind of went about all that stuff. That I thought was very useful for the movie. And so I thought he was really good in this too. I think that overall the acting was one of the highlights, because I do think like Paul talking, he was kind of like meh, but him as a
Hmm.
like action scene character was like quite good, and I think is
Yeah.
part of the reason why a lot of the action scenes worked.
Yeah. And I'll agree with that. The character's name is Ravi's, who we're talking about.
Yes, yes.
He was one of my favorites parts of this movie as well. But yeah, touching on the action, yeah, I gotta say that was probably one of the better parts of this movie for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, story wasn't there for me. I The swerve with Denzel, I don't know if it was meant to be a swerve, but I never saw him as the antagonist until he
Oh, I saw it.
like it makes sense, but like the way the movie was coded, and it led me to believe we were actually going up against the emperors, and then that didn't happen, and I just kind of lost interest at that point. But um, I digress. The action in this movie was a highlight for me, I think for sure. We start with that siege, that naval battle at the beginning, where they're all on those ships, and I was part of me was like, okay, it wasn't anything extraordinary, but like it was a good starting point because it was like, oh, this is neat, seeing how this plays out, even if it was completely telegraphed that his wife was going to get got. But
For sure.
um,
But the question is that because you knew from Gladiator 1, or like I think there was so much setup even before the battle happened that made it
mhm.
be like this is literally just Gladiator 1 setup, that I was like I knew it was coming for that reason.
Yeah, well, I mean, the setup, the first scene of the movies are both big battles. I think this one's different that it's got, they're attacking an island, they're attacking from the sea. But part of me was like, part of me wanted his wife to live so that A, it wasn't a rehash of what we've done before, and B, maybe
For
we have
sure.
two gladiators. I kind of wanted the two gladiator angle to come in. I thought first it would be
Mm-hmm.
his wife, and then the second would be Pedro, and then it would just be Paul and Pedro, or him and his wife, up against the two emperors. I think there could have been something cool there, and then they just never went that way. They're like, let's just do the first one again.
Mm-hmm.
So it is what it is. Also, weird that they also mentioned Romulus and Remus in another movie associated with Ridley Scott in the same year, months apart even.
I
Should have
mean, they
taken
are
note.
like the cornerstones of Roman history.
No, I totally understand. It's just interesting
Mm.
when you, I don't know.
I
I
do
was just
think,
like,
yeah, I think one of the cool things, like because this was less connected to gladiatorial arenas, like there
mhm,
was more time for other battles. We got a lot of cool stuff there. Like that first battle you're talking about was fun in that it was, yeah, like they used the boats and we got to see a siege, which is obviously a part of Roman history. We saw
yep,
them actually flood the arena and use
mhm,
traditional Roman boat tactics there, which was really cool. And so we got to see like a larger breadth of action scenes that were like a
mhm,
lot of fun, and I think showed off key highlights about Roman war tactics in a way that were um, very interesting there.
mhm,
I
yep,
do
and that's
think
yeah,
uh, going back to what you were saying before, which I forgot the point I was going to make. Never mind.
Ah,
I can't, we got so far away from it.
yeah. I mean, we got a taste of the some of the tactics and the games that the Rush or Roman army would use in the first one, but I do agree we got more
True.
of that here.
Yeah, land
Um,
battle anyway.
yeah.
What I was going to say, I remembered. You were talking about Macronus. So
Mhm.
I actually think that that's an interesting discussion about where this movie fails from a storytelling perspective, because this movie is so bad about connecting these things together with a through line that actually makes sense or matters.
Mhm.
Like I could tell what was going to happen just because it's like the obvious next thing in terms of what you would do in this kind of movie, like stereotypical, but not because the movie laid it out properly. So, a couple of examples being uh, the only thing that keys us in about Macronus wanting to take over was him saying, "I'm never going to tell you where I'm from or who I am," and then it's just
Mhm.
all of a sudden revealed that he was a slave of Marcus Aurelius. That's not storytelling. That's just causing things to happen. Uh,
Yeah.
Other examples being um, our main character Paul just deciding one day that actually he's okay with his mother now, even
Mhm.
though nothing has changed in the intermediary from the time when he was yelling at her to now.
Yeah.
Or uh, Pedro's character never really showing us that much that he actually loves Lucilla, other than just saying like I want to go home, and
Mhm.
then giving up his life for Lucilla's plan. Or he just kind of looks kind of annoyed with war, and so he's like, all right, I'll overthrow the emperors. Like all of these things just mostly happen with very little actual connective tissue that makes it into a story with a through
Mhm.
line. And so I
Yep.
think that's an interesting part there of like why you probably couldn't connect to these dots is because it doesn't connect them for you very well.
No, and there was another. You bring up all those examples. I'll bring up another one. Paul Mescal. I keep calling him by the actor's name. Lucius. We'll call him Lucius. When it's him and Pedro in the Coliseum. Why did I forget what that was called? But them going up against each other when they've captured Pedro Pascal's character and they're having him fight, and it's his Denzel's way of giving him his head, serving on a platter to Paul Mescal, and him all of a sudden just kind of flipping the switch, being like, actually, I don't want to kill this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I wanted us to get there, but it's like there's nothing that logically would make me think, oh, of course he doesn't want to do that. And like from everything you've shown me beforehand, he would not do that. And
Right.
there's a few bits and pieces like that, like you just mentioned. So yeah, the story's not the strong point here for sure.
I do think that the ending of the movie was pretty disappointing too. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just kind of they all show up for this battle and then he just kind of talks them through it. Like we've got uh in all of these movies past, one of these things that just kind of like happens, like a guy just kind of walks up and is like, actually we don't need to fight. But
Mm-hmm.
he's not like we don't get any build up for the true Roman side, we'll say not his 5,000 Roman soldiers, but the ones actually part of the Roman guard. The whole movie are just doing what the emperors want with no indication that they would ever go against them or that they even are leaning against them. And so you have that, which in and of itself I think is disappointing. But then also you have this fight that is Lucius, a 20 something, 30 something year old, like in the peak of his health, leader of a battalion in Numidia against a Macronus who's like, if you're really giving him something like late 40s at best,
Yeah.
and they go into this fight, and Macronus is just like putting him down for like the first couple of minutes of this fight. And you're like, this is like not even really that realistic of a fight to me. So the whole thing was kind of just like this this is not a way to bring all of this together.
Yeah. No, I agree. That was, and it just feels like such a stretch of disbelief where he's able to, a kill him, which I expect that, but then be able to say, no, this is not the Rome my father wanted. Let's all go back and have a good time instead. And they're all like, yeah, okay, that sounds cool. Let's do that. So it didn't feel super earned, like you mentioned. There's no mention or hints of the Praetorians being like, actually, this guy stinks. Like they're very gung ho about helping him out throughout the movie. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that didn't really do anything for me. Um, and I know we briefly touched on it, but I'm no expert on chimps or monkeys in general. Would a man be able to strangle a baboon like that? I
Uh,
know if it were a chimp, I know that's not happening, but that's not a baboon.
well, so I was having a discussion with Maddie about this because
Uh-huh.
when they were shooting them with those blow darts, she thinks that they were tranking them. And
Okay.
so, like, it's basically like a timing thing. You have to kind of survive until they, like, slowly wear down. And so,
Okay.
if that's the case, I think it's more likely.
Sure.
Uh,
That makes
I
sense.
don't necessarily even think that's the most egregious animal thing in this. Like, the rhino was really bad,
Mm-hmm.
the sharks were really bad.
That was
There's
terrible.
at one point, I'm pretty sure they show an Asian elephant in place of an African elephant, and I'm not really sure why they made
Hmm.
that decision, but uh,
That's interesting.
there's there's that, and I could be wrong. It was like one shot, so I'm not gonna
Yeah, I
lay
didn't
that
see
down. But
that. I believe you.
overall, they just like so poorly portray animals in this. I really think they basically just coded them like we want them to be animals that Rome would have access to, but they're actually just going to play the role of like traditional animal characters in movies. So
Yeah.
like the rhino is really just a bull,
It's
right?
just yeah,
Like
just trying to
so
impale everything in its sight. Yeah.
but they didn't want it to be a bull. They wanted it to be a rhino, so it would be like African, and you would think
Hmm.
Rome conquering Africa.
Right. Yep.
And so I just kind of had to like put that aside and just be like whatever. It's kind of a cool fight, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah. I think they're trying to recapture the magic of the tigers from the first one, and I don't think they ever really did. That's just me. Now, if you want me to be scared, get a hippo in there, all right? Then I'd be nervous. But I will say, we've been harping on this movie a lot. I do want to give a shout out to the build up to, because I think this is one of the three lines that did work for me, where you learn that Paul Mescal is Maximus's son, and you show the armor that he wore in the first Gladiator movie, and it's just kind of it has its own monument with the words "What we do in life echoes for eternity." Like all that's there. It's really cool stuff. And then the build up to him looking at it and being like, "I'm gonna put this shit on. I'm gonna rock this fit." Like that worked for me actually. Not like on a level that anything from the first movie did by any means, but it was like, okay, no, this evoked an emotion in me. So I want to give a shout out to that.
We're gonna differ heavily on that one
Mm,
because, and we can transition to this if you want, but I actually think this movie uh, is somewhere between neutral to somewhat harms the legacy of the first movie
mm,
in a couple of different ways, and this is one of them. In that, the idea that you now make in hindsight, uh, him the son of Maximus hurts the entire character that was Maximus in the first movie in
mhm,
a way that I don't like, and I think they attached a lot of that stuff to that movie to pantomime mostly. I don't think that him putting on the armor does anything for me. I just think they wanted to reference the first movie.
mhm.
And so
100%.
like that's where I run into the issue with it is if it if it didn't if it felt natural and it didn't feel like it actually harmed the character and the story of the first movie, I'm not
Mhm.
opposed to that, but in this case I actually think it was a mistake.
Yeah. Well,
And it's not like, you know, no one in the movie understands that that's Maximus's armor and that it means anything. None of those people were around when
mm,
that happened and would remember it. So it's literally only for us. Even Ravi, who's like, hey, look,
Yeah,
here's his armor, is like, I was here
it's his
after
dude.
Maximus died. Like, he
Yeah,
wasn't even around at the same time. So it's like,
that's a fair point. I hadn't considered that. I mean, it really is just like, here's some junk food. We know you like the first movie. Here's a little bit of that. Here, have a French fry, some extra
mhm.
salt, extra crispy, crinkle cut. I'm like, yeah, I'll eat that shit. But I'll only eat like once or twice. Because yeah, I do agree. You pointed that out. Uh, that's definitely not Maximus's MO to have a child
An extramarital
out of
affair.
an affair. Yeah.
Or,
Um,
you know, leave his child behind if it was an extramarital. Just be like,
mhm.
I don't.
If he was at all aware that he had an extra kid out there, yeah, he wouldn't have just done that. Um, so yeah, that bugs me. I will say, starting with the wall of text at the beginning of the movie, saying when Maximus died, his dreams for Rome died with him too. I was like, that
And
bugged
just
me right off the
full
bat.
reset, right back to the exactly
Yeah,
where we started before the last movie. All right, sick, cool.
not because that's how we do the plot of the first one again. That's how we do it.
Yeah.
No, for real this time, it's going to be different. We walk into the three. Paul Mescal's dream of a new Rome died with him. It's like, when did he die? I don't know, man.
They also like it. They turn it the wrong way. So like, the Maximus dies, right, and then he gets to go be with his family, and
Hmm.
they code it the same way, but then go, actually,
Yeah,
Paul, you're gonna live because you're gonna be the one that brings Rome to the new world. So then why did we set this whole thing up with the visions and seeing
yeah.
his wife cross the river and all of like you just set all of that up to then be like, actually, he doesn't get that death where he can go be with his family after he succeeds in saving Rome. Cool.
Well, the only river he crossed is the one he killed Denzel in. But yeah, I'm okay with that. I think for as much as they're like, oh, he's gonna die, and then they're like, oh, just kidding. It's like at least they're not doing the same thing as the first movie. That's kind of where my opinion lies on that.
I see. I'm cool with that if the first movie doesn't exist because that does it
Hmm.
better. Like it's a better
Yeah,
decision when he dies, and so then
I
you look
agree.
at it and compare him and go, "This is fucking worse." Like,
Hmm. Yeah, and you never have that moment here because if you were to do something like this, you got to have a moment where Lucius is like, so fixated on killing Pedro Pascal and then joining his wife. Um, you need that moment for his ending in this movie where we leave him at the end of this movie where he has a turn. He's like, no, actually, I do kind of want to work on building Rome towards what my father wanted and what, my grandfather Marcus Aurelius wanted. So
a
I,
Rome
you need,
he never actually saw. By the way, he was a what
right.
5 year old kid at the time of this
Hmm.
believed Rome.
Yeah. So we never get that moment where it's like, oh, actually, because then that would have made him being alive at the end of this feel earned in a way. But again, we're just kind of like told, oh no, he's alive, and he's cool with that. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. But part of me wonders too, because I know Ridley Scott's talked about making another one that maybe we get that later down the road. I don't know. I've kind of, as much as I did kind of enjoy this movie, I'm kind of worn out. I don't know if I see a third one.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to really convince. I mean, the you have so many issues there. Like you'd have to really convince me
Hmm.
as well. So we don't need to necessarily go deep into that, but you have a
No.
lot of issues if you wanted to try and make a third one, and I don't think you should.
How do you make another movie with a bunch of gladiatorial battles in it when we're trying to reform and get away from that? I don't understand. Oh, actually, hard reset. Let's do another hard reset. That'll work. I don't know. We got any other thoughts before we start wrapping up?
Overall, I mean, I just think if you want to go see Rome, you like Rome, or you like fun action scenes, this has those. If you're wanting to see it because it's a continuation of the Gladiator story, don't.
Yeah, if you want a cool movie about ancient Rome or Greece or anything like that, there's a movie you can watch called Gladiator 2. You could watch it if you want. It's a Let me just say, all right, I've forgotten like 60% of this movie. I'm gonna go on a huge tangent here. I'm gonna stop right there. But overall, this movie is just it's okay. It's okay. Like Austin said, it does a huge disservice, I think, to what the first one does, and that's like a Best Picture winner, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I do
Um,
believe so.
so this was always going to be an endeavor in foolishness, trying to follow that up, and I think Ridley Scott's the perfect man to do that because this has not reached the heights for that. Um, so yeah, like Austin said, if you want to see some cool shit battles, there's a couple of them. Neat.
Two, in
Uh,
fact.
two, in fact, at most. And I am just blabbering at this point. It's okay. I've decided I'm going 6.5 out of 10. That's my final score. It just made me want Gladiator 1 again. That's the problem. They're so similar. I just like this could be better. The entire movie.
Well, here's how you can just like distinguish these two. I remember I said I watched Gladiator 2 earlier in the week, and I got to the end of that movie and I went, man, that's a good movie. I
Mm-hmm.
got to the end of this movie and went, I'm disappointed. So there's your
Yeah.
distinguish, your delineation.
Yep. I had a very similar. I checked my watch like 5 times during this movie. I didn't check my watch once during Wicked or Venom 3. Now that I think about it, which is arguably no, which definitely worse than this movie. So there you go. There's our Gladiator 2 review. If you've seen it, what are your thoughts on it? Do you like this better than Gladiator 1? I'm sure some people do, and that's totally fine. That's your opinion. Let us know in the comments below. Also, be sure to follow us. We do a bunch of gameplay streams. We talk about other movies and react to trailers, all that good stuff. So be sure to subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitch and our socials. We'll be back later. Thanks for watching. We love you. Bye bye.